Welcome back. As I push for 60,000 subscribers, your subscription would mean a lot. Etihad Airways and Emirates once discussed coming together as a landmark merger that would change the industry forever. However, after deliberation, discussions, and a changing climate, the airlines decided not to move forward. Now the airlines are collaborating by other means without moving ahead with consolidation. Why didn't the two airlines come together? And was it the right decision? So firstly, why on earth would Etihad Airways and Emirates merge? These are two major international airlines, and it does seem a little bit peculiar because in 2024 you could consider both to be successful. Consolidation within our industry has become, it has to be said, a much more common theme since the pandemic. That's not to say that it didn't exist long before as well, because it did, but arguably in the last few years, many have looked to come together. In the case of Etihad and Emirates, these airlines could see the combination as an important means to increase market share together. Moreover, acquiring Etihad's assets could enable Emirates to grow more rapidly while supporting the Abu Dhabi-based carrier. In some instances, these companies that are coming together could save one from imminent collapse caused by financial turmoil. The assurances of another company stepping in allow for the safe transfer of assets, and this includes employees. Remember, the Emirates and Etihad merger discussion hasn't occurred in the last 3 years. It was in the 2010s, and this was at a point where Etihad were bleeding money, and that's not an exaggeration. I'm talking billions and billions being lost every financial year. On top of the reasons that I took a look at, a merger can also come about with a view to increase connectivity and take further market share that, say, in areas that are more competitive, two smaller fishes in a big bowl could look to merge to eat away the bigger fishes. These, though, are probably not the best example for being smaller fishes. First talk of a merger actually followed reputable reporting from Bloomberg, who identified via several sources that a prospective deal was in the early stages of being discussed. These discussions, as I touched on, occurred in the latter stages of the 2010s, specifically 2018. In 2018, Etihad, like I said, was in a far from ideal position, and by the time the 2010s ended, Etihad was amassing billions of dollars in losses each year, and due to its dire financial situation, there were calls for the airline to consider consolidation to turn around its fortunes. Without the state backing, Etihad likely wouldn't have been able to weather the storm and turn around itself and would have collapsed. However, Emirates, who were not in strife, presented a fresh opportunity through a prospective tie-up that would allow for the UAE to be consolidated quite significantly. Emirates would have looked to use its assets to chart a turnaround plan for Etihad with the view of operating as one. Given Etihad's horrific position, many believe that this had some legs behind it. Through pure determination, and one of the primary reasons a deal didn't proceed was actually thanks to Etihad's rebuild, and a successful one. Despite several claims that the airlines were entering into negotiations of a deal, Etihad never gave up its true goal, and that was becoming stable again. As part of this extensive turnaround plan, Etihad transformed itself from a debt-making airline into a once more stable and profitable company. However, this turnaround wasn't an overnight job, nor did it come with, say, not significant sacrifices. Across the turnaround that included a global pandemic, Etihad slashed its workforce, retired aircraft, and cut so many routes. They were hell-bent on turning themselves around and moving ahead in a more stable manner. Despite the massive changes, Etihad stuck to the course and emerged as a much leaner and sustainable airline. Analysts argue that this stability was something not present in the company in the 2010s, and it almost felt like it had to go through these hardships to truly learn what the future would be. When discussing the prospective merger, Emirates executives highlighted the Etihad rebuild several times, noting that Etihad moved from a company with no future to one that was stable and independent. This newfound stability was a huge reason why Emirates believed a tie-up was not worth pursuing. They believed Etihad's current state would be the best for them. Is it a bad decision? Well, some analysts argue that a prospective tie-up actually would have been bad news for Emirates, who were enjoying success at this period. I draw a lot of parallels to the most recent failed JetBlue and Spirit merger. Many people believed that the struggling airline in Spirit, which in the Emirates and Etihad case was Etihad, would have benefited greatly from having a major and stable airline come into the fray. But in the case of JetBlue and Spirit, most argue that JetBlue were completely out of their mind to look at taking on a struggling airline such as Spirit, and this would be detrimental to their long-term future. In the case of Emirates and Etihad, how they would look to combine would have been fascinating, because typically airlines that come together have different business models as they look to merge their assets for the greater good, but these are two airlines that have very much similarities. The pair look to offer the best in-flight experience using the latest generation aircraft, and their geographical positioning is so similar that they use their hubs as transit locations for onward flying. They really rely also on wide bodies. Because of these similarities, a tie-up could be perceived as risky because of what Etihad would offer Emirates, which wasn't all that different, and you'd have assets such as fleet and crew, but you would be bringing along high debt levels, and really nothing all that different. Another important consideration for the pair was that they knew they could partner in other ways, rather than consolidation. The signing of an interline partnership agreement in May of 2023 was a view of them expanding their agreement and giving customers additional itinerary options across the UAE, and a perfect example of what can be done instead of coming together and combining all of your assets. The pair, through this interline agreement, wanted to capitalize on the market by enabling customers to visit locations on a single ticket. Ultimately, such partnerships are just one of the many ways you can see airlines come together. However, let's say a deal had progressed. It would have been subject to very heavy scrutiny from global regulators. We've seen far less get rejected. These regulators would have examined the overall impact on passengers and other airlines in the region. It would have been important to understand whether this tie-up would have positively or negatively affected these relevant stakeholders. Regulators watch closely over airlines' mergers across key global markets, and as a result, many much smaller mergers like I touched on have been turned down for key reasons such as a fear that they would overall rise ticket prices in the region, or they would have a negative impact on companies that are attempting to compete. Ultimately, Emirates and Etihad didn't proceed with the merger, but they still hold each other in high regard, so it was hardly, say, a not moving forward because of a soured relationship. Do you believe this had any legs behind it? Do you think the eventual outcome of them working together in other means was better? Or would you have liked to have seen them come together as one? Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you very much for your support here on the channel. It certainly does mean a lot. Take care, be safe, and I'll see you in a couple of days right back here on GlobeTrotting for your latest industry news.
And we'll fly.